Good afternoon. Welcome to today's virtual plant clinic. I'm just going to take a few minutes while everybody gets logged in. We'll have a moment here to pause and then I'll give you guys some notes and we'll get started. First of all, quick, if you guys notice the light flickering, there's nothing wrong with your computer. We're just having some issues with the software for our camera. So just be aware that you might see the light color change on David's screen. We have a few notes for those of you who might be new. If you are, welcome. We're glad you could join us for the first time. To all who are regulars on the Plant Clinic, joining us for a second time, welcome back. We're glad to have you. For those of you who are new, if you have questions during the class, you're going to type those into the chat box or the Q&A. Let me open up the chat right now, actually, for you guys. And we'll be taking questions during the class. I'll be relaying those to David. We do record this class. We do not send out an email following these 2 o'clock plant clinics, but the recording will be available on our YouTube channel tomorrow, usually around lunchtime. It goes up, so you can go look for it if you need to leave for any reason, or if you just want to revisit it, you can do that. I think that's about it on my side. I'm a little rusty on these because I've been out on maternity leave, but if you guys have any issues during the class, just let me know. Please feel free to send me a chat. I'll help you as best as I can. And I think that's about it. David, I can hand it on over to you. You can get started.
All right, I was going to say, Sally, you might have to reintroduce yourself. It's been a while since we've seen you, but
I know.
it's fantastic having you back. It's fantastic having everybody join us today. So I've got a relatively short program today. I'm just talking about trees and shrubs for foliage color, for fall color at this time of year. So we really like to make this conversational. So by all means, if you have any kind of gardening questions, it doesn't have to be related to today's topic. Feel free to send that in, and let's just kind of have a nice conversation here about plants and gardening. The reason we're all here. So yeah, we're moving into the fall season. Obviously, we're having some beautiful weather right now, though it is very dry out there. I'm so happy we had the little bit of rain that we've had. So I know we're not seeing a lot of color out there yet. The color that we were seeing in the fall foliage earlier has mostly been drought stress. That's part of why I lead in with that. So a little bit of yellows and browns and shedding you've seen. That's not fall color. That's because conditions have been dry. And we're still more than 2 inches below average rainfall. So if you want to help your garden out, probably the single best thing you can do is be to water generously. But like I said, as we move later into the season and the days get shorter and we've got the cool temperatures here, I think we're still for a fabulous fall season as far as foliage color goes. Like we've got just enough rain to save the day, keep those leaves on there hanging on a little bit longer, and in the weeks ahead, we're going to have like amazing fall foliage color. So I thought this could be kind of a cool topic, present early in the month where maybe you get inspired, maybe you think about it and decide, hey, I want to go out and maybe add some new trees or new shrubs to my garden that we can really highlight for this fall color. So it's a perfect time for planting and a perfect time to be looking at your garden and assessing and adding a little bit of that fall color to it. So I'm going to start. I've got a handful of trees, looks like about a dozen trees I'm going to talk about. Then we'll take a little Q&A break from that, see if we have any questions regarding the trees that we've discussed. And then we'll continue on where I've got several shrubs that we can put into the garden. So with that, let me go ahead and get started. Okay, so I'm starting here local with some native trees. And I would say we're so fortunate. And I was talking with a colleague of mine that I think I always want to live someplace where I have 4 seasons. I like each season. I love the change that's in there, and that otherwise just be boring, right? So we're coming up to one of the most dramatic and my favorite season of the entire year, which is the fall, where suddenly the landscape takes on a whole nother look as the deciduous trees and shrubs start to change their color as they get to prepare for their winter dormancy. And this is the type of scene that we can look forward to in the weeks ahead. Now, the image that I have here shows a nice I say just sort of Virginia landscape where you have this mix of diverse plants growing in there, diverse trees. Somebody's cleaned out the understory in here, but you can see the American holly in there, which is an evergreen. And we're going to talk about evergreens because some of those change color during the fall. The bright yellow there is a hickory tree. I keep thinking that hickories are so under recognized. They're not very often used as a landscape tree for a couple of reasons. One is they have a kind of a rightfully earned reputation where they don't transplant well. So it's not the easiest tree to transplant and get established in the landscape. And the other, of course, are the hickory nuts, which can be quite large and can be a little bit messy as far as maintenance under. But again, keep in mind those hickory nuts are a phenomenal food source for all types of wildlife. So as we look at our shrinking natural spaces and we look to our gardens to provide that type of habitat planting, all these trees provide a myriad of benefits, not just there to give us pretty color in the fall, but also supporting wildlife. And at this point, I'm saying, hey, also the hickory nuts that support a lot of the animals that are out there. But later, if you're driving around, you'll see this really, really nice, bright, vibrant yellows, or sometimes almost this burnt orange kind of color. Tall, upright trees. There's a good chance you're looking at a hickory there. And hey, if you got the right environment and decide you want to add to the landscape, you can certainly give that a try. But the center of my attention, I'm going to say, is the deep red tree that's going there. This is our native dogwood, the Cornus florida, which is familiar to everybody. And we think of that for the beautiful flowers that it will often have in spring, usually about the first part of April, where it flowers before the leaves even begin to emerge. And that's one of the things that's so amazing about a lot of the plants that I'm featuring today is that they will have interest and serve valuable function throughout the entire year. So you look at dogwoods there and you'll have flowers in the spring, nice green canopy through summer, and then they'll get some really, really rich hues of red in the weeks ahead as we start going into the fall season. They also have the berries, which again, a lot of songbirds will eat those as we head into the fall and winter. So it provides ecological value as a beautiful tree. And you see it here in its natural environment, sort of as I call an understory tree. So you can plant them in full sun or you can put them in full shade. But where they're really going to do their best is this edge habit where they get enough sunlight that they can really flower and put on a good show for you in spring, but they also get a little shade from the extreme heat as we go into summer. So there's just our native straight species that you see here, and you can get those in white or pink, sometimes what we call a red, not really a red, but a real dark pink, trying to chase after red. But this plant has been hybridized, so you've got the Chinese dogwoods that give you deep red coloration, different looking fruit, and then you've got hybrids in there. There's variegated leaf forms, so there's a whole bunch of them, but maybe one of my favorites is, again, just our native Cornus florida. And if you come in, we'll show you all kinds of varieties that develop better disease resistance, larger flowers, different colors, an amazing group of plants to choose from. Now, right along with that, we're going to talk about the redbud. Again, this is another native tree throughout the Virginia, Maryland area. These are really nice for our suburban landscapes because you can see in the picture there, they don't get too big. Now, red buds can grow as a clump, multiple stem tree, which is pretty commonly seen. But a lot of times the nurseries will train them to a single stem so that it makes a better landscape tree. In this case, like if you're trying to mow around it or it's just or plant ground covers or something like that under there. So again, there has been like a ridiculous amount of breeding and selection and hybridization with these, because like for every time you see our native eastern dogwood, there's also an Asian species, and then we play around and mix things in between. But you'll get them with that kind of magenta pink flower that comes on there in early spring, and then they will go to this bright deep yellow color in the fall. Also, they tend to have this really dark bark behind them, and so the form of the plant begins to contrast nicely. And again, so there's a tree for all seasons, and really, I think it gets overlooked for its fall value that's in there. But again, as you're seeing, I look these kind of multi-purpose trees. Most of our fall color, I say, it used to really kick in. I've lived here all my life, as most we would start to see this really lighting up in sort of the second, third, late October time period. But it seems like just over my lifetime, I've watched these seasons shift and move. A lot of times now we don't start getting into peak fall color almost until we're pretty much into November. So you've got some time, like see if you to figure this out. If you came into the nursery today, you wouldn't find them looking like this. What you'd find is basically the green leaf form. Now this is my little trick picture that's in there, because if you look at the background around it, you'll see this isn't really a fall picture. This is a spring picture, because you can see behind it, it looks like some. I can't remember if can't tell if that's a oak tree back there or maybe it's a birch tree in the background, but it's fully leafed out. So this picture is actually taken, I think, around May time period, and everything is leafed out and looking nice and green. But this is a variety that's called Hearts of Gold. One of the things that's happened in the world of red buds is they've developed them to have different leaf color and leaf textures. So you look at these Hearts of Gold that emerges out as this really bright yellow color. It holds it pretty well into the summer, but as the temperatures start to get up, it becomes a little bit of a light yellow chartreusey color. And then again, it goes into fall, we get another display of nice yellow color. There's also one of the earlier or later varieties there's the one we call flamethrower, where you get these kind of oranges and burgundy and yellow colors, multiple colors showing up in the leaves. These all have those nice pink or magenta flowers in spring. So again, these trained up, you can see single stem. This is a HOA kind of planting where they can mow under. But these are all really nice additions. Will give you spring flowers, but also fantastic color as we move into the fall. It also grows similar to the dogwood in saying that it's kind of this understory tree. So you will find it growing in full sun. You'll find it growing in full shade, but its happiest place where it's going to do the best for you is that kind of in between, where maybe you get a really good, strong, nice morning sun or late afternoon sun, but that really hot midday sun, it might get a little bit of protection. Would be kind of the preferred environment for that. And let's go on. Oh, there we go. Hearts of Gold. And there's many others. So there's a lot of good reasons to be planting native trees. They are well adapted to our climate, is a good thing. But again, even the native trees, when we go extended droughts and stuff, we got to keep them watered. So they're not carefree, but they do better with some of the temperature or moisture extremes that we do go through and flow through. And again, they also support a lot of our native insects, a lot of our native birds, so they provide those ecological services as well. So what am I looking at here? This is sourwood, or Oxydendron arborea. It's in the same family as azaleas and rhododendrons and blueberries, so it's in the heath family. And if you look at that close-up image I have of it in the summertime when it's blooming, because again, it's kind of a summer bloom, you look at that, and that flower you can see looks so much like a blueberry does, right? So this is how we can kind of identify it as in the same family. You'd look at this tree, and then you look at a blueberry shrub, and you say, well, how can those be so closely related? Well, again, it's really through the floral structure is one of the ways that we really start to see that. Of course, now that's all this genetic and DNA analysis and things that have done to redefine, reclassify, and give us an even better imagery of how they evolve and develop. But that flower form comes in. So the sourwood, it's a finicky tree. I'm sitting here telling you it's a native tree, it's adapted to our environment and all those good things, which is true. But as far as getting it successfully transplanted from the field into your landscape, they can be a little touchy in that regard. So sometimes if you can get a smaller size tree, or preferably one that's grown in a plastic pot or a container, we might have a little bit higher success rate on those. But we do sell these. They're popular because everybody want so. I mean, why not? Beautiful kind of mid-sized tree, relatively slow growing, not going to get too large or overwhelming in smaller suburban landscapes. Nice flowers on the in the summertime. Fantastic for pollinators. If anybody's ever had the sourwood honey, would certainly recognize that and see the value of it. But the other thing, I think where it really looks its very best is in the fall. This is one that takes on this brilliant scarlet red coloration. And it's one of those that will do this early in the season. So probably, I'm going to guess, late October, early November time period. You can see it where it just gets this really bright red hues, and then the translate sort of moves along and becomes a little darker kind of magenta color as we move through the season before it actually sheds the leaves. So if you got the right environment, and that right environment would be sort of a well-drained, a moist but well-drained soil, the same kind of environment you would grow azaleas and rhododendrons in. The drainage is something that's pretty critical to this. Where I'll see them most is down in southern Virginia, and they're growing even on rocky hillsides out there. But I think the key thing there is that they're in well-drained conditions. Beyond that, pretty much an adaptable plant. Great. Now I'm going to move into a few larger size trees. If I haven't said this twice already, I'll say it a third time. This has to be really one of my all-time favorites. This is the black gum, Nyssa sylvatica. This is a tough, durable tree. It normally does grow in moist environments, along stream valleys, along shorelines and type of things as its home, but it is so adaptable. It will grow in almost any conditions. So when I say adaptable, it will tolerate these heavy, poorly drained soils. So those same qualities mean that I could put that in a pretty harsh environment like a parking lot, or I can put it even in an area that might be poorly drained. So they're often used like this, in this case around a detention pond, but you've seen them all around ponds and streams, or it can do well even out in your lawn, just in an open environment. So the black gum, they get big. Eventually 75, 100 feet tall is not out of the question. So this is not something to put in a little tiny confined space. This is put where you're looking for a long-lived tree that can reach and attain its full size. We have one of the most beautiful ones growing here in our parking lot at the Fair Oaks location. It's got to be every bit of 75 feet tall and probably 30 feet wide, 40 feet wide, one of the prettiest we've seen out there. So during the summertime, it's just got nice clean foliage on there. It doesn't produce a lot of mess. The female will produce a very small berry, but it's not a messy fruit, and usually the birds come and eat it. So again, it provides that ecological value. But in terms of fall color, it is just amazing. So again, one of the early ones that really lights up this bright red. Now, I said there was a time for many years this had a reputation, I don't know where it came from, of being hard to establish or difficult to transplant. But I think there just wasn't that much of a demand for it. But with the renewed interest in native landscape trees, they're pretty much well into production now. There's several named varieties, named cultivars. I think one's called Red Rage for its fall color. I'm trying to remember the name of that. Oh, the one's called Wildfire, where the new growth comes out kind of a plum red color, and then as it matures and expands, it goes to a green. So they're playing around a little bit with some of the coloration qualities on this, but super durable, very reliable, long-lived tree that will give you plenty of size. If you look for a nice native shade tree, we're just even filling in with a naturalized area, possibly screening a view, though it does shed its leaves in winter. So one of our most dominating tree species of this area where we live is the red maple, Acer rubrum. This is another super sturdy landscape tree, tends to be fast growing. And so for a lot of applications, here it's around the business park, it's really a desire to get something that's going to be very durable, sturdy, and established quickly. Well, red maples are good at all the above. Check all those boxes off on there. So again, this will become quite large. You know, these can easily go to, again, almost the same size, like 75 feet tall, but it's going to do this quicker. So it needs some room, some space to grow that's out there. But the reason I use this picture and like it so much is it shows the natural variability that you can get in pretty much all plants. So if you look at the tree, the furthest back one that's a bright yellow, you look at the one that's kind of a solid red, and then you look at the tree in the foreground that almost has that orange coloration. Those are all the same species of trees. Those are all red maples. And it's to give you an idea of the variation, the natural variability that can occur within any kind of population. So what we do in horticulture is we might say, oh, I like that one in the middle. I want something that's going to give me consistent red coloration throughout my landscape. And so these varieties get cloned, where instead of reproducing by seed, they just take cuttings off of the one tree that they love so much. It has the best form, the best color, some color early, some color late, and then they kind of reproduce those, and that's how it's done commercially. So in this case, this one is called October Glory. There's another very popular variety called Red Sunset. There's several others that I just haven't kept up with. So many new varieties are out there. I think Sun Valley and a big extensive list, Brandywine, we could go on. So there's cloned, propagated, and sold for these specific qualities so that when you come in to buy it, you can be assured that you're going to get a specific fall coloration in there. So when you see these different names on the plants, that's really what we're after, is to get a consistency, a specific quality. It's a way of kind of assuring you that the tree is going to grow into or turn out what you expect it to do or what it's supposed to look like on the tag. So I'm going to switch gears just a little bit on you. You can kind of see my progression. Okay, that's what I was talking about, showing you the consistency within the species where each tree looks the same. Those trees that you're looking at now, that this picture is taken some time ago. They're stuck in that little parking lot medium strip, and because of the stresses of heat coming off the parking lot, they're very restricted root zone, not enough room to grow. The way they've been pruned or abused, they're all kind of starting to move into decline, but it's not really anything wrong with the tree. It's just the environment and the stresses and everything that we often put plants under in an urban environment eventually take its toll. So if you had more room for it to grow, a larger area, didn't packed in around parking lots, that tree could be living much longer than it does. The sugar maple, this is also a Virginia native tree, but its native range is kind of from Virginia northwards. It grows in cooler, more mountainous areas. So the sugar maple is not going to do as well in a really hot, dry environment. So you see it planted a bit less often because it's not going to adapt to, say, like that parking lot conditions are. But yeah, we sell varieties that have better heat tolerance on it. That's what Green Mountain does for us. And sugar maples, these are the ones that can go through a whole sequence of color. You might, at the same time, you look at a tree where it's starting to go from, you get like a little bit of yellow, a little bit of orange, a little bit of red. You'll get this whole progression of coloration go on throughout. So they're one of the most spectacular and eye-catching when it comes to fall coloration. But they get large. They'll actually probably get a little bit wider than they get tall. So give it some room to grow, but another really nice specimen tree, nice shade tree kind of situation. All right. There we go. This is what I was trying to get moved to my next picture. Now I put a couple of these in just for fun. Big leaf magnolia, Magnolia macrophylla. You can see it gets its name because this has, I think of all our native trees, this has the largest leaf of any tree growing in this environment. Those leaves can easily get to be easily 12 inches long. You'll see them 18 inches long, and once in a while you get this really kind of oddball thing that goes out that might be almost 2 feet long. So they get these really large leaves on it. It's again, it may not be the most well-suited kind of landscape tree. That's why you really didn't even see them utilized that often. But with the renewed interest in looking at native species, we actually have some of these in the nursery now, and that's one of the reasons I put it in there. So if you can, I think this is a nice use for it out at Meadowlark Gardens because they've got the space for it. They kind of tuck it in there where it stands out against the background of the wood's edge that's there. And if you get these really large leaves falling on the ground, it can be a little messy in a home landscape, but in this kind of environment, that's not really a problem. So this is again, it's pretty cool. I also like because it shows a little bit of diversity within the magnolia family. Because when we say magnolia, pretty much everybody assumes we're talking about the southern magnolia. But there are several others, again, many of them that flower very early in the spring. Most magnolias are deciduous, shedding our leaves. The leaves are in there. The sweet bay magnolia, they call it semi-evergreen. I pretty much call it deciduous. That's a native variety. But again, this big leaf magnolia, if you're just kind of a plant collector, you look for something different, something that might be a little bit of a conversation piece. This is it. It's showing the fall coloration, which is, it's not to me, not really that eye stopping, or it's not going to really catch you eye catching that much. But it's a pretty cool tree nonetheless, and it had a little bit of fall color, so I wanted to put it into my slide set. Okay, I'm going to just show you about 2 or 3 more and then take a quick break for questions. So now I'm switching gears on you, and I'm moving away from native trees. So Ginkgo biloba, the ginkgo tree, really nothing native about this, or at least not at this point in time. But the fall color is a real attractor for it. Again, very, very sturdy tree, super interesting biology and history to it. But it's this bright yellow fall color. It gets everybody's attention. And they're kind of known to simultaneously shed their leaves all at the same time. So you'll walk by and a tree can look like this one day. I've never witnessed it myself, but it's said if you're there at the right time, you can stand there and watch the leaves drop at the same time together off of it. I've seen like videos and stuff, I'm sure everybody has on YouTube, but just never been there at quite the right time to see it. So they all come down at once. So this is really an interesting species because we have fossil records on this tree that go back 170 million years. So just try to get your head wrapped around that. That's, I can't really even comprehend what the term a million is or what a million years would even begin to look like. But this one, the earliest records show that long ago. So this is, it is kind of considered a conifer, or it was, but now they've got some taxonomists put in its own distinction, which means that it essentially, it's not a broadleaf tree. Its flowering characteristics are different. It will form a fruit that has a nut inside there. The females do, but as it starts to ripen and hit the ground, it's got a horrific smell to it. So for landscape purposes, we stay away from the female, but we tend to sell and use the male trees. But it really says a lot about the history of plants on our planet. It's one of the reasons I love it. Plants evolve from the water onto the land. And if you really get into the technicalities, I attended a whole workshop on ginkgos. It's really cool in the reproduction of it. During the fertilization of that egg, there's actually the plant has water inside, and it flies over or swims over during that fertilization thing. So its way, when it moved from water to land, essentially it brings water into the floral parts of it. But that's on the females. There's male and females, and I'm getting off on a tangent. The deal is super sturdy tree. This is from the Atlanta Botanic Gardens. Does well even in urban environments, but there's a lot of varieties. There's little miniature ones that you can put just into ornamental gardens, or there's big ones that you can use for shade trees that's out there. But again, super sturdy, fall colors unbeatable, distinctive venation and pattern in the leaf. And it kind of reminds me a lot of times I look at just sort of the wonders of nature and how things have evolved over so many years, so many conditions. It's just fascinating way to kind of interact with the world around you. Moving along, so this is a youngster, the Dawn Redwood, Metasequoia glyptostroboides. We all have to learn that one when we go through our plant training. This you can see it is considered a conifer. It has this sort of a needled structure and leaf pattern, and it does form a cone. So it's not considered one of the flowering plants. This is one of the gymnosperms that started early in here. I say youngster because his record goes back about 50 million years, kind of put this in perspective. So it is an ancient plant that was known through fossil records, but not known to exist anywhere in the world until, I can't remember, it might have been in the 1940s. I think it was a plant explorer in China found a little remnant population still growing in China and realized, wow, they are not gone. They still exist. And from that little population that was found in China all those years ago, it's now spread, multiplied. We have a couple big specimens of this planted here at our Fair Oak store. There's another big one out at the Merrifield location. They grow fast. If they get enough water, they just suck that water up and grow to a really large size. I think a fantastic structure to it, kind of this Christmas tree, pyramidal shape to it, and it casts a light shade. That's why we planted them, because it casts that light shade, which makes it easier for our specimen plants or landscape plants that we're showing and selling, keeping them a little bit, those that need some shelter and protection. In the fall, it's not super popular because the colors, it kind of goes a little bit of this yellow and then it starts to turn pretty quickly into a brown. Fortunately, most people, I think, look at it and I hear them talk and they say, oh, it looks like it's dying. But this is just a natural cycle. It shows, again, the diversity in the plant kingdom. So these are all, to me, really good reasons why we should incorporate for the fall. But that will totally shed, go bare in the wintertime, maintain that pyramidal form. You can see what the green looks like in summer. The fall kind of goes to this russet color, but still a tree I think everybody should kind of look at. Then I thought I'd show one more from China since we're showing a few introduced trees. This is Chinese pistache. Less known to us, but again, tends to be very, very durable, heat and drop tolerant. They're used further south from here, but they are reliably winter hardy for us in this area. It doesn't get that much attention at all, but in the fall, this thing just almost glows. So if you're looking for something that's a little different, like I said, and really want to bring out that kind of nice glow that's in there, this is certainly one that you might want to look at. It also does produce a little fruit or berry, but I don't think it's anything messy. And I'm trying to get back to there. See if we have any questions about any of the trees that we have in there. And if not, we can go on to shrubs. Sally?
Everybody, yeah, please feel free to send us questions. We don't have any at the moment, but David, we did have an interesting one. I know I've talked about with a couple of our colleagues, Lindsay and Bren. This person, she says, have I been mispronouncing the word foliage? I tend to pronounce it foliage with 3 syllables, but I'm hearing it foliage, which I actually noticed. I think that's a regional pronunciation. Like I grew up in Florida, which you know, David, and noticed people in Northern Virginia pronounce it foliage, but we've always said foliage where I'm from.
So
are you familiar with that at all? Like, is
I
there
am, believe it or
wrong and
not.
right?
This goes back in the days when we were doing TV shows and everything, and we frequently got questions or challenges on the correct way to pronounce it. So this was Debbie and I. She's like the researcher. She really wants to get it right. She dug into all this and looked at, and it really truly is that kind of tomato kind
Yeah,
of.
that's why we kind of figured it must be regional based on where you're from.
Right. It's spelled foliage, and that to me is probably the correct pronunciation. But I find myself falling back to Mace just from where I live. A lot of times I've been here all my life. A lot of times I often slip back and just say foliage.
Yeah.
I guess foliage probably is the correct one, but both are totally acceptable.
Okay.
And Debbie spent hours researching to confirm that. So
she should, yeah, that's what I remember talking with a few people about it, and that's why we just kind of came in down. It's got to be regional. Both are basically right, but I just
So
thought
what
that was
is it in
interesting.
Florida? In
We
Floridian?
all every growing up in when I went to school in New Orleans, so I think it's a southern thing in Floridian. Everybody says foliage. It's
Okay.
like three syllables, but and when you get a little southern, so it could be foliage, like with a Y almost, foliage.
All right. Hey, well, I'm glad you asked the question. We
There you
got
go.
to there.
Yeah, it's just interesting. I thought that was a good one.
At
Um,
the end of the day, I keep saying that language is to help us communicate with each other. And I got into this really big discussion with a big, well-known horticulturist. I mean, he's like PhD guy, works very highly regarded, highly esteemed um, professor who insists on using all the Latin botanical names. And we got into this conversation. I said, well, you can use all those and I understand them and I like that stuff, but does that really help you communicate with your client, with your customer? The bottom line is we need to try to communicate with each other. And I try not to get too hung up on all that, on the details, as long as we understand each other. So
yeah,
we're talking about the leaves.
that's great. All right. Well, we haven't had any questions come in, so I think we can move on.
Cool. Well, let's do that.
Thanks.
I'm sorry, my mouse seems to be acting a little weird today, but I'll get it. There we go. So now I'm going to progress into some of my favorite shrubs for fall color. So this is Father Gilla, definitely one of my all-time favorites. And even though we're talking about the fall foliage color or leaf color, I also put some of the flowers in because what I'm really after is I just love plants that have 4 seasons of interest. It's always the thing. I love watching these seasons change. So this one, Father Gilla gardeniae, it flowers in early spring. It's what we call apetalous. It has no petals on there, but what it does is all the stamens of the flower come out, and this kind of really cool bottle brush configuration that's in there. And it's got a slight fragrance. It's enough of a fragrance that if you're usually within 5 or 10 feet of that plant when it's in peak bloom, you can smell it that's in there. So it's got this really, really fantastic flowering quality in early spring. And then you can start to see where it really looks its very best, I think, is in the fall. So this is a little variety in there. It's called Suzanne. I chose this one because it's a particularly compact, small variety that I'm in a townhouse garden and I'm trying to pack as much into that little space as I possibly can. So for fall color, this again, the Father Gilla is pretty unbeatable. It's there. There's several varieties. Most of the difference between them really is in the size of the plant. They all do well, so you can pick one that fits into your landscape and the size constraints you're working with. It is sort of, think of it as a woodland plant where it's going to do its best in that kind of moist, well-drained, part sun, part shade type of environment. It's perfect, but it adapts pretty well even out into full sun. I've seen it out in full sun. You know, will be super dense, so you get some really spectacular fall color out of it. But I think it does its best where it just gets a little bit of this shelter that's in there. It is a member of the hazel family. And so as many of you that have heard me talk before know that basically anything in the hazel family kind of wins the thumbs up with me because they all have this really interesting floral characteristics, nice fall coloration that's in there. And this one is not really a Virginia native. It's native to southeastern Virginia. So you'll find it growing from really from North Carolina down. It might have even tiptoed into Virginia a little bit. So it's still, for me, it falls into my native category, but some people might challenge you on that. Now, right up there, other fantastic native shrubs for your garden. This is Virginia sweetspire. It sometimes gets called semi-evergreen, but I don't really like that term. Count on it. Basically, it's going to shed its leaves as we move into winter, but it does hold its color late into the season. So they're actually beginning right now to show a little bit of color showing up in there. That color will intensify. That's where I put that little inset in there. This is a variety that's called Henry's Garnet because of that garnet color that it gets as it moves later into the fall. And it often will hold some of those leaves and color, you know, even well into November, maybe depending on the weather, even into December variety. this is not my garden that's in there. This is somebody else's landscape that one of our designers had done. I like the way that they use the Itea Virginia native plant that will also do well again in stream valley kind of moist, almost wet environments. You can see the dogwoods in the background, then just transitioning back into the woodline. So I thought that was a nice composition that's there. When I was working on a new part of my own garden at home, I used a variety called Little Henry, which stays very small. It's going to be compact, only probably about 3 foot by 3 foot, eventually spreading out to maybe 4 feet wide. But that's what I was using. So again, you can select these plants and you'll find things like, Henry's Garnet, Little Henry. I think there's 1 or 2 others, but you can kind of find a variety or cultivar that fits your needs is sort of my messages there. So yeah, I think in that grouping, like you've seen there, kind of forming a hedge line, is perfect. They do get one of the reasons called sweet spires. They get in early spring, they tend to get white flowers. It's kind of a cluster, what we'd call kind of almost a catkin of little white flowers in there. So also has a sweet fragrance to it. So fragrant white flowers, usually I'm going to say around May, and then spectacular burgundy color, garnet color as we go into the fall. Another favorite of southeastern U.S., again, not necessarily Virginia, but kind of comes right up to the edge, so it fits in my category well enough. Certainly one of my favorite landscape shrubs, and I love the really large, coarse, textured leaves. That's why they call it an oak leaf hydrangea. You can see the similarity in the blue in the flowers that's there. No, getting mixed up in the leaf. It's the shade that's in there. But also, it does flower for us. Again, usually in May, flowers can be spectacular. They're very long lasting. As that flower matures, it kind of starts going to kind of a brownish russet type color. But then the fall color is also amazing. So when you're talking about plant for all seasons, here's one where I've got in the wintertime, you can start see peeling, exfoliating bark on there. In the spring, you'll get nice flowers coming off. In the summer, really coarse textured leaves. And then in the fall, they start going this really nice plum color that's in there. So this, again, there's many varieties. The one I'm growing in my garden is a tiny little one called Munchkin. It's been there for probably 8-9 years now. And it's still only about 4 feet tall, 4 feet wide. And I just pruned it back once to get it off the sidewalk kind of thing, to manage size a little bit. But there's others that have single flowers, double flowers. Some of them grow even 12 feet wide and stuff in between. So it's certainly a wonderful, beautiful shrub that you should add to your garden, just period. But also one that can give you some nice fall coloration in there. So back to this, the hazel family, because again, now I say all of them are really amazing plants with cool flowers and even prettier fall coloration that's in there. So this is a hybrid hazel type of witch hazel in here. So this is actually the leaf color, the larger flowers and everything came from the Chinese variety. So we have native witch hazels, but they tend to flower in the fall, and then they have kind of a yellow fall coloration. In this case, I just wanted for a little more drama in the fall color. So this is one of the hybrids that's out there. Again, you can see this thing will transition if you catch them early in the season. This is not photoshopped or anything. This is what it really, real plant, real looking, real leaf that's in there. Picture that I took showing spectacular pattern and coloration. And then it basically, this is a variety called Arnold's Promise. And this is kind of where it winds up at that stage. Now in the background, they put it, this is not tree or shrub, but again, that's a fantastic for fall color. That's a perennial that you see there called the Amsonia hubrecti, or blue stem. It is native to southern U.S. down, like I said, in Texas, New Mexico, that kind of area. Ridiculous heat and drop tolerance, super easy, but all that drops off and then you just cut it down to the ground. And then it comes back next year. Then my last 3 little pictures, and I'll go through this quick. Fall color can go beyond just the deciduous plants. trees and shrubs. It also includes evergreens. So evergreens do shed leaves, and evergreens do have fall color. It's just, it follows a different pattern. So what I'm looking at, this one of my coworkers was noticing this, looking out throughout our azalea collection, and we gathered up several varieties and put them together just to show the variation that goes in there. So you look at that, you say azaleas, well, they're evergreen, yes, but yeah, some of them will stay sort of a nice green coloration of. Some varieties actually shed like 80 or even 90% of their leaves. Some of them shed leaves completely. And then there's all these colors in between. So this doesn't mean anything is wrong with your plant. It's not sick. They are evergreens, but you still get some fall coloration, some degree of shedding, but also some degree of leaf retention on that. So again, it's cool. We think we buy them for the flowers, but don't overlook the value that they add in the fall. Boxwoods. This is a good example of what's called bronzing. You'll see boxwoods oftentimes start to take on these kind of orange colorations. What we've learned is that bronzing, this is one of the ways that the plants protect themselves from the sun's radiation through the wintertime. So if you are an evergreen plant and in the wintertime, the intensity of the sunlight actually increases. Even though the days are shorter, the sun is closer to the earth, you get higher, more intense radiation from the sun, and they will also take on this kind of discoloration as a means of protecting themselves. Next spring, they will green right up again. So a lot of times we have these coming into the clinic wondering what's wrong, why are their boxwoods dying. You'll see this on Cryptomeria, you'll see it on Arborvitaes. We'll see this on a host of other evergreen plants. And this is just the natural pattern of change as we move through the seasons. It's just not one that we talk about, or I think sometimes we overlook. So that's called bronzing. Then my final picture, we'll see if you have any questions, is evergreens do shed, but not necessarily 100% each year. So I'm looking at a pine, and this would be on Chamaecyparis and spruce and others. And so it holds its needles for 3 years. So this is a white pine. And what we're doing, we're looking at is holding its 1 year and 2 year old needles, but you'll notice how uniformly on the interior of the plant, on the inside, it's starting to yellow and shed. This is just a normal seasonal shedding. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with your plant. I have had a handful of samples of plants coming in here in September. Normally the shedding takes place in October, but we were seeing some plants that were so stressed, I think, from the dry conditions that we've been experiencing, that we're getting early defoliation. So I don't want to say ignore it. It is normal if I see that happening in October. If I see this happening in September, it probably is a clue that your plant needs a little TLC, which really means we probably need to do some deep watering on that. But beyond that, this pattern of yellowing, to see that happening in October, totally normal, nothing to be alarmed about. All right, so hey, we got through that in a good amount of time there. So if we have any questions, any other comments you might want to share,
Yeah, we do. And just so everybody knows, we'll start out with the ones related to the topic of today's class. If we have time for anything that's unrelated, we'll move into that. If not, then you can always follow up with David at the plant clinic or call your location that you usually shop at. Okay, first question. I think I may have convinced our HOA to get rid of some common area Bradford pears. Do you have recommendations for replacement trees that are around the same height with multi-season interest?
I mean, I'm trying to think through some of those that we showed. I think they're all good candidates that's in there. If you're looking for sort of the thing everybody likes about Bradford pear is it has sort of that upright columnar growth. There are certain types of maples that can do that for you. The other, I was thinking of, there are some really nice cherry trees that will do that. One that you might want to look at, I must mention, is what's called Okami cherry. It has that sort of medium-sized growth habit, a little more upright, can be a little taller than it is wide. and you get the early spring blooms. It's actually in the same family, but it doesn't have all those other problems. It's not an invasive species. It doesn't splinter and break as time goes by, and gives you, it's just really nice ornamental pear. It doesn't create, cherry, it doesn't create any mess that's in there. But beyond that, if we can step away from some of the flowering trees and look at just some of the nice trees, for growth. So what I'm trying to think through, and I'm not saying is like black gum does tend to have this upright columnar tree. You just saw how much I love it. It's native. There's a lot of really good things to say about. There might be some smaller varieties. That's the thing, is I don't know if I have any that will stay small enough and be more compact for that. Tree I didn't really put into our pictures here, but I'm a huge fan of the fringe tree. Again, nice native Virginia fringe tree. They don't get very big. They're going to stay at 20 feet tall, to give you an idea. That also can be a multi-stem or a single stem. In a more formal setting, or if it's a lawn area, you would want a single stem one so that you can actually grow grass and look under that. If we talked about this long enough, there's other, spring blooming magnolias, many things that we can choose from. But those are a couple of the first things that come to mind.
Okay, next question. Scroll back up. Okay, how big does the Virginia sweet spire, actually we have two sweet spire questions, so I'll ask them both. One, how big does the sweet spire get? And two, one of our attendees has a little Henry, but it's been putting out runners and has apparently become unmanageable. So is there any way to deal with that? It's a little Henry and it's sent out a bunch of runners. So how large and how do you deal with the runners?
So I'm really I'm glad that I had those questions. So if you look at just like Henry's garnet, sweet spire, and you just plant it, don't prune it, it can go 6 or 8 feet tall, 6 or 8 feet wide. They can get quite sizable. Little Henry is about half that size. Now the thing is, sweet spire, it produces runners. It grows more as a thicket of and this isn't really helpful to you as a situation you're in, but because that's one of the reasons I chose that plant, and I space them further apart and I'm allowing them to grow together in that kind of a thicket habit. So that's the normal pattern for it. If you're trying to contain the plant and restrict its growth and keep it from extending out into other areas, best way you can do that, and it's going to just be ongoing maintenance, is to take a spade, just go through there, chop it, and basically do some root pruning. Thing is, you're probably going to have to do that on an annual basis because that is the characteristic of the plant. And if you stop pruning it, doing the root pruning, it's going to continue to send those runners out. So if you were going to go through and do that root pruning, I'd say I want to do it either later this year after the leaves have shed, do that kind of in the fall, or maybe very early spring before the growth starts. But it's going to be a regular maintenance type of thing. So it may or may not be the right plant for you. I talk about all these wonderful qualities, but it also really, I think, is important in our plant selection. It has to meet the needs of the owner and the garden and the location that's in there. So that's probably the best way I can answer.
Gotcha. Okay. Next we have an oak leaf hydrangea question, which I actually wanted to ask you myself for my house. Will oak leaf hydrangea take intense afternoon sun? Can it handle afternoon sun?
It will. You can put them out in full sun. That's a little stressful on them, and you might see some leaf scorch on it, during really hot, dry spells, some burning around the edges. So I don't think it's the ideal location, but it's an example of a plant that can adapt to harsher environments. If you're going to do that, I would try to do really an extra good job at soil preparation, which means I want that oak leaf to be able to reach out and branch out and get a really as well established a root system as it possibly can. It is not too restricted or contained by really hard clay soil. So I often tell people, like, I don't really even like digging planting holes. I prefer to dig planting beds so those roots just don't face any of that kind of limitation. So good soil, so we get good roots and help that plant to get along through the really hot, dry weather.
Okay.
But I've seen them growing in full unprotected sun and looking pretty good.
Okay. Next question. Okay, this is related, so we'll follow up with this one. Which of the other shrubs that we discussed can take intense afternoon sun?
I'm still stuck thinking in terms of like fall color that's in there. So a couple that are really nice, and I just didn't have time. But if you look at like Spirea, uh, Deutzia, Weigelia, these are kind of old-fashioned plants, really known for their spring flowering qualities, which are really nice. But a lot of them also can bring on some interesting fall coloration, and a lot of varieties have a variety of different flowers that are in there. One that's just sitting right over my shoulder here, which I had thought, or a couple that I've looked at. So this is nine bark, also called Physiocarpus. These are both natives here in Virginia. This is, I have trouble saying the name, Tiervilla. It's in the honeysuckle family. These can go out into really full hot sun. You got a variety of different qualities about them, mostly playing around leaf color and shape, and they also can give you some really interesting fall coloration. So there's lots of stuff that's out there.
Okay.
I was thinking, I almost want to bring in this, keep going on this, I think, but there's a Weigelia that's called Sonic Bloom, has crimson red flowers, and it blooms in spring, and it blooms a second time with a few flowers sporadically showing up in fall. We had a few of those out in the nursery that had some fall flowers on. I almost brought that in for show and tell also. So, and again, a big range of sizes in there. Anything that's going to stay under 3 feet tall, the stuff that'll grow 10, 12 feet tall.
Okay. Okay. Let's see here. Try to scroll through. We're gonna start. We may have a minute or two for some other questions. How tall? Oh, how tall does the red bud tree get? What's the width of the canopy?
So to me, a mature red bud is essentially going to be maybe about 15 feet tall, 15 feet wide. That's over, let's say, a 30-year time span. So when we talk about the size of plants, I always have a challenge, because if you look at a tree from the day it grows, from the day it sprouts to the day it dies, it's constantly growing. So everything's relative to time. What I really don't like is most of the plant tags are probably looking at a size of around 10 years. But I bought my townhouse. I thought I'd be there for 5 years. It's now been 21 years. That's kind of how life is. It's just not predictable. So I try to get everybody to take a longer view on that, take a longer range of view. So if I'm saying 15 feet tall, 15 feet wide over a period of 25, 30 years, but you'll see specimens, you'll see older ones that will be even larger than that. And then just kind of, I'll now put an end to that. So there are Chinese red buds, but that's a totally different tree. It really, to me, looks more like a shrub. It's multi-stem, but there are dwarf ones, like there's one that's called Don Egolf, which really is more of a large shrub, and it may only grow to be 6 or 8 feet tall. So there's a range that we can work with in there.
Okay. Okay. Let's see. We're gonna have to do I'm gonna have to have you back to do another plant clinic on trees and shrubs, because we have so many questions on this.
Oh, good.
Yeah, no, it's great. We're about out of time, unfortunately. So I'm gonna have to direct a lot of people to call you, the plant clinic. Okay. I want to tolerate, sorry, I'm reading two questions at once here. I want to plant a fast-growing tree in my front yard that can tolerate full sun, clay soil, and drought. So sounds like a lot of common issues we have. Do these trees fit the bill? Oh, okay, here's a list of trees. Sawtooth oak, sweet gum, or London plane. Do any of those, would they recommend any of those?
So let's say all three of those foot the bill. But
Okay.
when I look at it, none of those three are going to be a favorite of mine. So if I look at like sweet gum wonderful native tree, fast growing, heat drop tolerant, checks all the boxes that are there. But keep in mind that it produces this what I call a gumball. It's this pretty large size, maybe 1/2, 2 inch diameter, spiky fruit at the end of the season. So it's messy to have anything under. If it's in sort of the a back area, naturalized area where you don't have to maintain anything around, beautiful trees, interesting bark, spectacular fall color, super durable, all good things to say about it. So there is a seedless form of it, but I'm going to just kind of give you a personal thing on it is the seedless form. That's nice that it doesn't produce any seeds, but it also kind of is lacking. It's got a different leaf texture to it. The fall color is not as dramatic. So it's like, hey, I get the nice thing where it doesn't have the seed pods on, but then I'm a little disappointed in the performance of the tree itself. So there's trade-offs on that. Other ones that you're talking about, like the London plane tree, absolutely checks all those boxes. And it's really a wonderful tree for a super durable tree. I will give you a little bit of a hesitation on it because they get really big, so they need a lot of space. Doesn't suit itself well to a lot of the kind of settings we have around here. But if you have the space for it to grow, super durable, fast, it gets really nice white peely bark and looks great in the wintertime. They do get kind of a little bit of this nuisance disease. It's not really harmful to the plant, but anthracnose, which can lead to shedding of the leaves. Sometimes they leaf out a little bit late, they drop twigs, so sometimes they can be a little bit of a mess, but otherwise, totally sturdy. And the first one you mentioned, which I'd forgotten, was actually my winner of the group. What was that, Sally?
I'm going to check. Sorry, we have so many questions outstanding. Sorry, guys. Okay, let's see. Sawtooth oak.
So sawtooth oak, good news, bad news. It's pushing a little bit on its winter hardiness on us here, in really, really cold conditions, you can get some damage, but it has just a little bit of shelter. We can get past that thing. One of the things that's cool about sawtooth oak is that it will hold leaves very late into the winter, even though they go this brown color. It still gives you a little shelter and protection that's in there. Again, the acorns on that are pretty big and can be a little bit messy. So all of those trees, I just say that they're good trees, they're good choices probably, but keep in mind sort of what environment's in, what surrounding is it there, and are you willing and able to deal with things like acorns or the little gumballs.
Perfect. Okay. All right. Well, we are over time, everybody. I have sent out my email in the chat because we have so many questions. If anybody wants to follow up, you can also call the store, go visit David or any of the plant clinics. Everybody's happy to help. David, I may follow up with you and see if we can set up like a tree and shrub Q&A. This is great. I'm so glad there's so much interest in this, but definitely way more than we can address in terms of questions in one session. So
that's great, because I really, again, like I started, I prefer to be more conversational and just Q&A, but if I'm not getting questions, I keep going with all these pictures, to fill the time, so to speak. But we can absolutely talk about that and work on it.
All righty, great. Well, everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. Again, please feel free to follow up with your questions. We're happy to address them. I won't address them. I'll forward them to someone who can, to David or someone else. But we look forward to seeing you at the next plant clinic. David, thank you.
Okay, thanks everybody.
All righty, bye.
Bye-bye.